The summer heat in Manhattan's Little Italy was unforgiving. By 7 in the evening, the asphalt still radiated warmth like an oven that refused to cool, and the humidity clung to every surface, every person, making the air thick enough to taste. Inside Carmelo's trattoria, the situation was no better. The ancient air conditioning units wheezed and rattled, barely making a dent in the oppressive temperature that seemed to intensify with every table that filled. Naomi Carter moved through the crowded dining room with practiced efficiency, her dark skin glistening with perspiration, despite the towel she kept tucked in her apron pocket. 26 years old, 5'6", with her natural hair pulled back into a tight bun that had started the shift neat but now showed signs of the chaos around her. Her brown eyes, usually bright and alert, had taken on a glazed quality that came from exhaustion so deep it had become her normal state. "Table 7 needs water refills," barked Marco, the floor manager, a perpetually stressed man in his 50s, whose Italian accent thickened when the restaurant got busy. "And table 12 has been waiting for their appetizers for 20 minutes. Check with the kitchen." "On it," Naomi responded automatically, her voice hoarse from calling out orders and answering the same questions dozens of times. Her feet ached in the non-slip shoes she'd bought secondhand 3 months ago, the insoles compressed to nothing. She'd been on those feet for 11 hours straight, her double shift stretching into territory that probably violated several labor laws. Not that anyone here cared about such technicalities. She delivered the water with a smile that had become muscle memory, checked on table 12's order. The kitchen was backed up, another 15 minutes at least, and returned to deliver the news with apologetic sincerity that she no longer felt, but had learned to fake perfectly. This was her life now, had been for the past 2 years, ever since her mother passed and left Naomi as the sole provider for her younger sister, Jasmine. 21, brilliant, attending Columbia University on a partial scholarship that covered tuition but nothing else. Books, housing, food, transportation, all of that fell on Naomi's shoulders that felt like they might crack under the weight. She worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a coffee shop in Midtown, afternoons doing data entry remotely when she could grab a few hours, and evenings and nights here at Carmelo's. Sometimes she picked up weekend catering gigs. Sleep happened in 4-hour intervals if she was lucky. Meals were whatever she could grab between shifts, usually the staff meal at the restaurant, which she often saved half of for breakfast the next day. The math was brutal. Her studio apartment in Washington Heights cost $2,000 a month. Jasmine's housing near Columbia was $1,800. Utilities, transportation, groceries, Jasmine's textbooks. It all added up to a number that always seemed just slightly more than what Naomi could earn, no matter how many hours she worked. She was drowning slowly, treading water in an ocean that had no shore in sight. "Naomi!" Another server, Lisa, a young white woman who'd been working at Carmelo's for 6 months, grabbed her arm. "Your section, table 15. They're asking for you specifically." Naomi's stomach tightened. Table 15. She knew exactly who sat there. She'd noticed him 3 months ago. Impossible not to. Vincent Marcello arrived every Friday evening at exactly 7:30, accompanied by 3 men who moved with the predatory awareness of trained fighters. They always took table 15, the large corner booth that offered clear sightlines to both entrances and kept their backs to the wall. The table that Marco always kept reserved, no matter how busy the restaurant got, no matter how many customers complained. Vincent Marcello was impossible to miss, even, or especially, seated in his wheelchair. Mid-40s, with dark hair silvered at the temples, sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't so severe, and eyes like polished obsidian that seemed to catalog everything they observed. He wore suits that probably cost more than Naomi made in 6 months, perfectly tailored to his frame, and moved his wheelchair with casual expertise that spoke of years of practice. Everyone at Carmelo's knew who he was, what he was. The whispers among the staff painted a picture. A powerful figure in the organized networks that still operated in certain corners of New York. A man who commanded respect through reputation and capability despite his physical limitations. A man you didn't want to notice you. But he had noticed Naomi. She'd felt his gaze on her for weeks now, tracking her movements through the restaurant with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He never said anything inappropriate, never made crude comments like some customers did. He was unfailingly polite, tipped exactly 25%, and always requested her section when she was working. It was the attention itself that unnerved her, the way his eyes followed her, the slight smile that touched his lips when she approached his table, the questions he asked, never personal, always courteous, but probing nonetheless. "You look tired today, Miss Carter. Are they working you too hard? That's an interesting bookmark in your apron pocket. What are you reading? Your sister is in college, isn't she? Columbia? That's impressive. How did he know these things? She'd never told him about Jasmine. Naomi smoothed her apron, rolled her shoulders back despite the ache settling between her shoulder blades, and approached table 15 with her professional smile firmly in place. "Good evening, Mr. Marcello. Gentlemen." She nodded to his 3 companions, men whose names she'd never learned and didn't want to know. "Can I start you off with drinks this evening?" Vincent's dark eyes fixed on her, and she felt that familiar sensation of being thoroughly seen, examined, assessed. "Good evening, Miss Carter. The usual, please. Pellegrino for the table, and I'll have the Barolo. The Aero 7 if Marco still has it in stock. I'll check with him right away." Her pen moved across her pad, though she had his order memorized by now. Every Friday, the same ritual. "You seem more tired than usual tonight," Vincent observed, his voice low and smooth, with just a trace of an accent that suggested Italian heritage several generations back. "Everything all right?" "Just a busy shift," Naomi replied, keeping her tone light. "Friday nights, you know how it gets." "I do." His gaze didn't waver. "You've been here since when? 8 this morning? I saw you through the window when I drove past earlier." The comment should have been innocuous, but something about it sent a chill down her spine despite the heat. He'd been watching, noticing, keeping track. "The coffee shop next door," she explained, though she didn't know why she felt compelled to. "I work the morning shift there sometimes." "That's 2 jobs then. Plus, I've heard you do freelance work as well." Vincent leaned back slightly in his wheelchair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "That's ambitious. Or necessary." The distinction was sharp, cutting, he knew. Somehow, this man had looked into her life, understood her circumstances. "Necessary," she admitted, seeing no point in pretending otherwise. "But I manage. I'm sure you do." Something flickered in his expression. Approval? Respect? She couldn't read it. "You strike me as someone who always manages, Miss Carter, even when you shouldn't have to." One of his companions, a broad-shouldered man with a scar along his jawline, cleared his throat pointedly. Vincent's attention shifted, releasing Naomi from that intense focus. "I'll get those drinks started," she said quickly, retreating before the conversation could continue. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the order at the POS terminal. Marco appeared at her elbow, his expression grave. "He asking about you again?" "Just making conversation," Naomi replied, keeping her voice steady. Marco shook his head slowly. "Naomi, listen to me. Vincent Marcello doesn't just make conversation. When a man like that takes interest, it means something. Be careful, yes?" "I'm always careful." But even as she said it, Naomi felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her like a physical force. Her vision swam slightly, and she braced herself against the terminal. "You okay?" Marco's concern was genuine, cutting through his usual gruffness. "Fine. Just need to catch my breath." She pushed away from the terminal, grabbed the water pitcher, and headed back into the fray. The night blurred after that. More tables, more orders, more smiles that felt like they were painted on with lead. Naomi moved mechanically, her body operating on autopilot while her mind felt distant, disconnected. The headache that had been building all day intensified into a dull throb behind her eyes. When had she last eaten? Breakfast? No, she'd skipped breakfast to catch an extra hour of sleep. Lunch had been a protein bar grabbed between jobs. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Jasmine. "Hey sis, my rent check bounced. Can you send money tonight? They're threatening late fees." Naomi's chest constricted. The check bounced. Of course it did. She'd been juggling accounts, moving money around, hoping everything would clear in time. Another plate spinning in the air, another disaster she needed to prevent. She texted back quickly, "We'll transfer tonight. Don't worry." But she was worrying. The math wouldn't work. She'd have to ask for an advance on her paycheck, which Marco hated doing. Or maybe pick up extra shifts next week, though she was already working 70-hour weeks. Or, "Naomi, table 8 needs their entrees." Lisa's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She moved, picked up the heavy tray of pasta dishes, balanced it expertly despite the way her arms shook. Table 8, a family of tourists who'd been pleasant enough, complained that their food was taking too long. Naomi apologized, served them with efficient grace, answered their questions about Times Square recommendations she'd given 1,000 times. The room tilted slightly as she walked away. She paused, gripping the back of an empty chair. The restaurant's noise, the clatter of dishes, the buzz of conversation, the kitchen's chaos, seemed to compress and expand around her like a living thing. "You good?" Another server passed by, barely glancing at her. "Yeah, fine." Naomi released the chair, straightened her spine. She had 4 more hours on this shift. 4 more hours, then she could go home, collapse on her bed for maybe 5 hours before her morning shift started. She could do this. She'd done it before. Table 15's entrees were ready. She loaded the tray, Vincent always ordered the osso buco. His companions had various pasta dishes and the veal piccata. Heavy plates? Expensive food served to men who probably never thought twice about whether they could afford their next meal. The resentment was unfair, and she knew it. But exhaustion stripped away her usual emotional buffers. She was so tired. So infinitely, endlessly tired. She approached table 15, the tray balanced perfectly through years of practice. Vincent looked up as she neared, and something in his expression shifted, sharpened. "Miss Carter," he began, but Naomi was already setting down the plates, reciting the dishes on autopilot. "Osso buco for you, Mr. Marcello. Pappardelle for you, sir. The veal piccata." The room spun, not slightly this time, but violently, as if someone had grabbed the restaurant and twisted it. Naomi's vision narrowed to a tunnel, edges going dark. The tray slipped from her hands. She heard it clatter, heard someone shout, but the sounds were distant, underwater. Her knees buckled. She was falling, distantly aware that this was bad, that she was causing a scene, that she was about to hit the hard floor, and strong arms caught her. Impossibly, she was being held, supported, even though her consciousness was slipping away like water through cupped hands. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her completely was a voice, close to her ear, speaking words that would echo in her mind when she woke. "Now you're all mine." Consciousness returned in fragments. Softness beneath her. Cool air against her skin. The absence of noise. The chaotic restaurant sounds replaced by profound quiet. Naomi's eyes fluttered open. An unfamiliar ceiling stared back at her. High, ornate, with crown molding that looked like it cost more than her annual rent. Soft light from a crystal chandelier illuminated what was clearly a bedroom, though calling it that seemed inadequate. It was a suite, massive and expensively furnished in dark woods and rich fabrics. She bolted upright, instantly regretting it as her head swam. A hand pressed gently against her shoulder, not restraining, just steadying. "Easy," a woman's voice said. "You fainted. You're safe, but you need to move slowly." Naomi turned to find an older Latina woman, perhaps in her 60s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She wore simple but elegant clothing and held a glass of water. "Who are you? Where am I?" Naomi's voice came out raspy, her throat dry. "My name is Maria. I'm Mr. Marcello's housekeeper. You're in his residence, his penthouse. You collapsed at the restaurant. He brought you here, and his private physician examined you. You've been unconscious for about 3 hours. 3 hours. Panic flooded through Naomi. "I need to go. I have to. My shift." "Your shift is over," Maria said firmly. "And Marco has been informed you're safe. Mr. Marcello handled everything. Now drink this water slowly, and then we'll talk about what the doctor said." Naomi took the glass with trembling hands, her mind racing. She remembered falling, remembered being caught, remembered that voice. "Now you're all mine." The memory sent chills across her skin. "The doctor," Maria continued as Naomi sipped the water, "said you're severely exhausted and malnourished. When did you last have a proper meal or a full night's sleep?" I can't remember." The admission felt shameful. Exactly what he thought. Maria's expression was sympathetic but stern. "You're running yourself into the ground, mija. Your body gave you a warning tonight. Next time might be worse." "I don't have a choice." Naomi's voice cracked slightly. "I have responsibilities, bills. My sister—" "I know," Maria interrupted gently. Mr. Marcello explained the situation. Of course he did, because apparently Vincent Marcello knew everything about her life, had been watching, collecting information, like she was a file to be studied. "I need to leave," Naomi said, pushing back the luxurious covers. She was still in her work clothes, she realized, minus her shoes. "Thank you for the care, but I need to go home. Mr. Marcello would like to speak with you first." Maria stood, moving toward the door. "He's been waiting. Are you feeling steady enough?" No. She felt like her entire world had tilted on its axis. But Naomi nodded anyway. Because what choice did she have? You didn't refuse a man like Vincent Marcello, especially not when you were in his home, dependent on his hospitality, already indebted to his care. Maria led her through the penthouse, and it was spectacular, Naomi couldn't help but notice. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan's glittering skyline. Art that looked museum quality hung on the walls. Every surface spoke of wealth so profound it became almost abstract. They reached a study, warm with wood paneling and soft lamplight. Vincent Marcello sat behind a massive desk, his wheelchair positioned perfectly, his attention on a laptop screen that he closed as they entered. "Miss Carter," he gestured to a chair across from him. "Please, sit." "Thank you, Maria." The housekeeper departed, closing the door softly behind her. Naomi sat, acutely aware of her rumpled uniform, her disheveled hair, the vast gulf between her world and this one. "How are you feeling?" Vincent asked, his dark eyes studying her with that same intensity she'd felt at the restaurant. "Fine. Thank you for your help, Mr. Marcello. I apologize for the disruption. I'll leave now and—" "You'll stay," he interrupted smoothly, "and listen to what I have to say. Then you can decide what you'd like to do." It wasn't a request. Naomi's spine stiffened. "With all due respect, I don't think—" "You're killing yourself." His bluntness cut through her protest. Working 80-hour weeks across multiple jobs, barely eating, barely sleeping, trying to support yourself and your sister on wages that would be insufficient for one person, let alone two. How long do you think you can sustain this, Miss Carter? Until you collapse again? Until something worse happens? Anger flared through her exhaustion. "That's none of your business." "I'm making it my business." Vincent leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the desk. "I have a proposition for you. A solution that benefits both of us." "I'm not interested in—" Naomi began, standing. "Sit down." The command in his voice was absolute, the tone of a man accustomed to obedience. Despite herself, despite her anger, Naomi sat. That was his power, she realized. Not just physical force, but presence, authority that made defiance feel impossible. "I need someone," Vincent continued, his voice returning to its normal, smooth register. "Someone intelligent, observant, trustworthy. Someone to manage my schedule, handle certain administrative tasks, accompany me to meetings. A personal assistant, though the role is more complex than that title suggests. In return, I offer you a salary of $15,000 per month, full medical coverage, housing if you want it, and I'll cover your sister's complete college expenses. Tuition, housing, books, everything." Naomi's breath caught. $15,000 per month. That was obscene, impossible. More money than she'd ever dreamed of making. Why? The question came out barely above a whisper. "Because I can afford it, and you need it." Vincent's expression was unreadable. "Because I've been watching you for months and I see someone with qualities I value. Resilience, intelligence, discretion. Because I want you working for me instead of running yourself to death in that restaurant. You don't know me. I know enough." He opened a folder on his desk, pulled out several papers. Naomi Carter, 26, born in Brooklyn. Mother deceased 2 years ago, father absent. Younger sister Jasmine, 21, junior at Columbia studying biochemistry. You've been supporting her since your mother's passing. No significant debt beyond month-to-month living expenses, which means you're somehow managing to stay afloat through sheer force of will and excessive work hours. You're educated, 2 years at City College before you had to drop out to work full-time. You're reliable, punctual, and well-liked by coworkers and customers. You also have no criminal record and no romantic entanglements that would complicate this arrangement. Each fact he listed felt like a violation, like he'd been rifling through her life without permission, because he had been. "This is insane," Naomi managed. "You can't just— This isn't how people hire assistants." "I'm not people, Miss Carter." Vincent's smile was slight, almost predatory. "And this isn't a normal position. You'd be entering my world, which comes with certain complications, risks, but also opportunities you'll never find serving pasta to tourists." "Your world?" Naomi met his gaze directly, finding courage she didn't know she still possessed. "You mean the world where people are afraid of you, where your table is always available, where laws seem not to apply?" "Exactly that world." He didn't flinch from her directness. "I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. Working for me means accepting certain realities. It also means protection, resources, and the ability to give your sister the future she deserves without destroying yourself in the process." Naomi's hands clenched in her lap. Every practical bone in her body was screaming at her to refuse, to run, to escape this apartment and never look back. But another part, the part that woke up every morning with anxiety already tightening her chest, the part that watched her bank account with constant dread, that part was calculating. $15,000 a month. In 1 month, she'd make what currently took her 4 months of brutal work. Jasmine would be secure. The constant terror of bounced checks and late fees would disappear. She could breathe. But at what cost? "I need to think about this," she said finally. "Of course." Vincent slid a business card across the desk. "My private number. You have until Monday to decide. If you're interested, call me. If not, you'll find a gift in the bag Maria prepared for you, enough to cover this month's expenses for both you and your sister. Consider it compensation for your time and a thank you for being such a pleasant presence at Carmelo's." He was giving her money either way, making refusal harder by creating obligation, or perhaps just demonstrating the casual generosity available to him. Either way, it was manipulation, however elegantly executed. Naomi stood, taking the card. "Thank you for your help tonight, Mr. Marcello. I'll consider your offer. I hope you will." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hunger, perhaps, or possessiveness. "You interest me, Miss Carter. That doesn't happen often. I think we could accomplish remarkable things together." The phrasing sent another chill through her. Not "you could accomplish," but "we could accomplish." As if her acceptance was already assumed, her future already written. Maria appeared to escort her out, providing the promised bag. Inside, Naomi would later discover, was $5,000 in cash along with her belongings from the restaurant. As she stepped into the elevator that would take her down to street level, back to her real world, Naomi caught one final glimpse of Vincent Marcello watching her from his study doorway. His words from earlier echoed in her mind. "Now you're all mine." Not yet, she thought. But the card in her pocket felt heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. Monday was 2 days away. 2 days to decide whether to leap into the unknown. The weekend stretched before Naomi like an endless expanse of uncertainty. She'd taken the subway home from Vincent Marcello's penthouse in Lower Manhattan, clutching the expensive leather bag Maria had given her, hyper-aware of every person who glanced her direction. The $5,000 cash felt like it was burning through the bag's material, announcing itself to every potential thief on the train. Her studio apartment in Washington Heights had never seemed smaller or more depressing. The paint was peeling in the corners, the radiator clanked loudly regardless of season, and the window looked out onto a brick wall 3 feet away. She'd always told herself it was temporary, just until Jasmine graduated, just until things improved. But standing there at 2 in the morning, still wearing her work uniform, Naomi saw it clearly for what it was. A cage she'd built for herself out of necessity and circumstance. She dumped the bag's contents onto her narrow bed. The cash was bundled neatly, 50s and hundreds, more money than she'd ever held at once. Tucked beneath it was a note in elegant handwriting. "For your immediate needs. The offer stands regardless of your decision. VM." Even his generosity felt like a trap. If she took the money and refused the job, she'd owe him. If she took the job, she'd owe him everything. Naomi counted out $1,800, exactly enough to cover Jasmine's rent check that had bounced. She'd transfer it first thing in the morning. The rest she hid in the false bottom of her underwear drawer, a hiding spot that felt absurdly inadequate for this amount of cash. Sleep didn't come. She lay in bed watching the shadows shift across her ceiling, her mind churning through possibilities and consequences. Every practical argument pointed toward acceptance. $15,000 a month would transform her life. Eliminate the constant stress that had become so normal she barely recognized it as abnormal anymore. Jasmine would be secure. Naomi could maybe even go back to school, finish her degree. But the cost? Vincent Marcello wasn't offering her a job. He was offering her entry into a world she'd spent her whole life avoiding. A world where violence was currency, where loyalty was enforced rather than earned, where the law was an inconvenience rather than a boundary. And there was something else, something harder to articulate, the way he'd looked at her, the possessiveness in his voice when he'd said, "Now you're all mine." This wasn't just about hiring an assistant. Vincent Marcello wanted something from her, something beyond administrative tasks and schedule management. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "Sis, you awake?" The money came through. "You're a lifesaver. Are you okay, though? You sounded stressed earlier." Naomi typed back, "I'm fine. Just had a long shift. Get some sleep." But she wasn't fine. She was standing at a crossroads, and both paths led to places she'd never imagined going. Saturday morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through her inadequate window. Naomi had maybe gotten 2 hours of sleep, her mind too active to rest. She showered, changed into her only pair of nice jeans and a decent blouse, and made a decision. She needed information, real information, not just the whispered rumors that circulated at Carmelo's or the vague warnings from Marco. If she was going to make this choice, she needed to understand exactly what she'd be walking into. The New York Public Library's main branch was her first stop. In the computer area, she searched for Vincent Marcello, finding surprisingly little. A few old newspaper articles from 5 years ago about a shooting incident in Little Italy that left one man paralyzed. No names mentioned, but the timing matched. Articles about community charitable donations from local businessman Vincent Marcello. Property records showing he owned several buildings in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Nothing overtly criminal. Everything carefully sanitized and legal on the surface. She tried different search terms. Marcello family New York, organized crime Manhattan, Little Italy business owners. The results were frustratingly vague, full of historical information about organized crime families from decades past. but little concrete about current operations. Of course, men like Vincent Marcello didn't end up in news articles. They operated in shadows, maintaining legitimate fronts while conducting business the public never saw. Naomi closed the browser, frustrated. She was approaching this wrong. She didn't need internet research. She needed human intelligence. Marco. He'd warned her about Vincent, which meant he knew something. And he'd been working at Carmelo's for over 20 years, long enough to understand the neighborhood's hidden dynamics. She texted him, "Can we talk? Not about work. I need advice." His response came within minutes. "Dolce Cafe, noon. I'll be there." Marco was already seated when Naomi arrived at the small cafe 2 blocks from the restaurant. He looked older in daylight, away from the controlled chaos of the kitchen, the lines on his face deeper with worry. "You didn't come in for your shift last night," he said as she sat down. "After Friday, after what happened, I was concerned. I needed time to think." Naomi accepted the espresso he'd already ordered for her. "Marco, I need you to tell me the truth about Vincent Marcello. Everything you know." The floor manager's expression grew grave. He glanced around the cafe, sparsely populated on a Saturday afternoon, and leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "What I know could get both of us in trouble for discussing," he began. "These aren't people you talk about casually, Naomi. He offered me a job." Marco's eyes widened, then narrowed with understanding. "Ah, that explains the attention. That explains everything." He rubbed his face tiredly. "Madonna, this is complicated." "Then help me uncomplicate it. Who is he really?" Marco sighed deeply. "Vincent Marcello is what we used to call a capo, a captain in the organizational structure. His family has controlled certain business interests in Lower Manhattan for 3 generations. Protection, importing, construction contracts, union influence. Nothing you could prove in court, everything insulated through legitimate companies." "You're talking about the mafia." Naomi said it directly, needing to hear it confirmed. "I'm talking about a businessman with complicated interests," Marco corrected carefully. "But yes, essentially. 5 years ago, there was a power struggle. Someone tried to eliminate Vincent. A car bombing that killed his driver and left Vincent paralyzed from the waist down. He survived, and those responsible didn't. Since then, he's been even more powerful, even more feared. The wheelchair didn't weaken him, Naomi. It made him more dangerous because it proved he was unkillable." The espresso was bitter on her tongue. "And he wants me to work for him, which means he sees value in you. Vincent Marcello doesn't make casual offers." Marco's gaze was piercing. "What exactly did he propose?" Naomi explained the offer, the salary, the benefits, the coverage of Jasmine's expenses. Marco's expression grew more troubled with each detail. "That's too much," he said finally. "For an assistant position, even a personal one, that's excessive, which means the job is either more complicated than he's saying or," he paused, choosing words carefully, "or his interest in you extends beyond professional." "He's been watching me for months," Naomi admitted, "noticing details about my life I never told him. That's his way. Vincent doesn't act impulsively. He observes, plans, then moves with precision." Marco reached across the table, gripping her hand with paternal concern. "Naomi, listen to me carefully. If you take this job, your life changes completely. You become part of his world, under his protection, but also under his control. People will see you differently. The police, rivals, even your friends. You'll be associated with him, which brings both safety and danger. But I'd be able to take care of Jasmine, to stop drowning." "Yes," Marco conceded. "You would. The money is real, the security is real. Vincent takes care of his people. That's well known. But the cost is your independence, your ability to walk away. Once you're in that world, Naomi, leaving becomes very complicated." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down like a physical force. "If I refuse," Naomi said slowly, "does he become dangerous to me?" "No." Marco was firm on this point. "Vincent operates by old rules. You refuse respectfully, he respects that. He might be disappointed, but he won't retaliate. That's not his style, especially not with someone he's shown interest in protecting. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless." "What would you do?" Naomi asked. "In my position." Marco smiled sadly. "I'm not in your position, mija. I'm an old man with a pension and grown children. You're young, brilliant, with a future being stolen by circumstance. If I were you, 26 and desperate," he paused, considering, "I'd probably take the job, and I'd hate myself a little for it, but I'd do it anyway, because sometimes survival requires compromises we never thought we'd make." Sunday was Naomi's day off, her only full day each week without work obligations. Usually she spent it doing laundry, meal prep, and trying to catch up on sleep. Today, she took the subway to Columbia to see Jasmine. Her sister lived in a shared apartment near campus with 3 other students, a cramped space made bearable by youth and optimism. Jasmine answered the door in sweatpants and a Columbia hoodie, her hair in braids, her face lighting up with genuine joy at seeing Naomi. "Sis, I wasn't expecting you." She pulled Naomi into a tight hug. Come in, come in. My roommates are all out, so we have the place to ourselves." The apartment was cluttered, but clean, full of textbooks and lab equipment, and the detritus of young academic life. Jasmine made tea while Naomi settled on the worn couch, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Just 2 sisters spending time together. "You look exhausted," Jasmine observed, handing Naomi a mug. "More than usual, I mean. What's going on?" Naomi had planned what to say, but sitting here, looking at her sister's concerned face, the careful script fell apart. "I got a job offer," she began. "A good one. Really good. Better than anything I ever expected." Jasmine's face brightened. "Naomi, that's amazing. Doing what?" "Personal assistant to a businessman. High-level stuff. The salary is significant. Enough to cover all your expenses comfortably, plus let me stop working 3 jobs." "That's incredible!" Jasmine set down her tea, excitement bubbling over. "You deserve this so much. You've been killing yourself for me, and I felt so guilty." "Don't," Naomi cut her off. "Never feel guilty for pursuing your education. That's not negotiable." "But I do. I see how tired you are, how much you sacrifice. If this job means you can finally breathe, finally live instead of just surviving, then that's the best news I've heard in years." Jasmine paused, her enthusiasm dimming slightly. "Why do you look worried about it?" Because Naomi had never been able to hide anything from her sister. "It's complicated. The businessman, his operations aren't entirely conventional. There are aspects of the work that would put me in contact with elements I've always avoided." Jasmine's intelligence was sharp enough to read between the lines. "You're talking about something questionable, potentially dangerous." "Potentially? How dangerous?" "I don't know exactly. But the person offering the job has a reputation, a serious one." Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke again, her voice was measured, mature beyond her 21 years. "Naomi, you've spent 2 years putting my needs above your own well-being. You dropped out of school for me. You work yourself to exhaustion for me. I love you for it, but I also hate it because I see what it's costing you." "Jas, let me finish." Her sister's brown eyes were fierce. "If this job is dangerous, if it compromises your values or puts you at risk, then I don't want you to take it. I'll figure something else out. More loans, a different school, something. But if you're just scared because it's unfamiliar, because it requires trusting someone you don't know yet, then maybe that's different. Maybe that's worth the risk if it means you get your life back. It's not that simple. It never is." Jasmine reached over, taking Naomi's hand. "But you're the smartest person I know. Whatever you decide, it'll be the right choice because you'll have thought it through from every angle. That's who you are." The faith in her sister's voice was almost painful. Naomi wished she felt as confident in her own judgment. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, deliberately avoiding further discussion of the job offer. Jasmine showed Naomi her latest biochemistry project, something involving protein folding that went mostly over Naomi's head, but that Jasmine explained with infectious enthusiasm. They ordered Thai food, watched a movie, pretended for a few hours that life was simple and choices were easy. But as Naomi rode the subway back to Washington Heights that evening, the weight of the decision settled back onto her shoulders. Tomorrow was Monday. Vincent Marcello was waiting for her answer. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of fate. Naomi called out sick from her coffee shop shift, the first time she'd ever done so without actually being ill. She needed this day, needed the time to make this choice without the distraction of work. She held Vincent's business card, the paper expensive and thick between her fingers. The number written there in his precise handwriting felt like a gateway to another world. 3 times she picked up her phone. 3 times she set it down again, her courage failing. Finally, at noon, she made the call before she could overthink it further. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Carter, I was beginning to think you weren't going to call." His voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, controlled, carrying an authority that seemed to transmit even through the phone line. "I have questions," Naomi said, keeping her voice steady. "Before I make any decision, I need real answers. Not careful phrasing or polite evasions. The truth. I appreciate directness." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Ask whatever you need to know. Your business operations, are they legal? Some are entirely legal. Others operate in gray areas. A few cross lines that the law defines clearly, but that practical reality makes more complicated. No hesitation, no deflection. I won't insult you by pretending to be a simple businessman, Miss Carter. If I work for you, am I breaking any laws? Not directly. You wouldn't be involved in operational aspects of the more questionable ventures. Your role would be legitimate, managing my schedule, handling correspondence, accompanying me to meetings. However, you'd have knowledge of things that, if shared with law enforcement, could create problems. So while you wouldn't be committing crimes, you'd be expected to maintain discretion about what you see and hear. Naomi paced her small apartment, processing this. And if I decide later that I want out, that I can't handle what I'm seeing? A pause, longer than his previous responses. When Vincent spoke again, his tone was more serious. That would be disappointing, but not impossible. I don't hold people against their will, Miss Carter. However, there would be conditions. You'd need to maintain confidentiality permanently. That's non-negotiable, and timing would matter. If you chose to leave during a sensitive period, we'd need to ensure certain transitions were handled carefully. But yes, you could leave if you genuinely needed to. You said there are risks. Be specific. My position creates enemies. People who would hurt those close to me to diminish my power or send messages. If you work for me, you become someone close to me, which makes you a potential target. It's unlikely. I have extensive security measures, but possible. You'd need to be aware of your surroundings, follow security protocols, accept protection that might feel intrusive. At least he wasn't sugarcoating it. And the personal aspect. Marco suggested your interest in me might extend beyond professional. Another pause. Marco is observant. Yes, Miss Carter, I find you interesting on multiple levels. Your intelligence, your resilience, your dignity despite circumstances that would have broken most people. But let me be absolutely clear. Accepting this job doesn't obligate you to anything beyond professional duties. If something more develops between us, it will be because we both choose it freely. I don't coerce, I don't manipulate affections, and I don't use professional authority to extract personal compliance. Is that clear enough? Yes. Her heart was pounding, but his directness helped. One more question. Why me? You could hire anyone, someone with actual experience in this type of work. Why a waitress from an Italian restaurant? Because experience can be taught, but character can't. I've watched you handle difficult customers with grace, manage chaos with efficiency, maintain kindness despite exhaustion. I've seen you diffuse arguments between kitchen staff, remember regular customers' preferences, and slip extra food to the homeless man who sits outside the restaurant. Those things tell me more about who you are than any resume could. His words landed with unexpected weight. He'd been watching, yes, but he'd been understanding what he saw, valuing qualities she'd never thought anyone noticed. I need a few more hours, Naomi said, to think about everything you've told me. Of course. Call me back before 6 tonight. If I don't hear from you, I'll assume your answer is no, and will part with my appreciation for your consideration. The call ended. Naomi stood in her apartment, phone still in hand, her entire future balanced on this impossible choice. She thought about Marco's words. Sometimes survival requires compromises we never thought we'd make. She thought about Jasmine's faith. Whatever you decide, it'll be the right choice. She thought about Vincent's voice saying, "Now you're all mine," and wondered if she was about to fulfill that prophecy or defy it. At 5:30, as afternoon light slanted through her inadequate window, Naomi made her decision. She picked up the phone and dialed. "Mr. Marcello? I accept your offer. When do I start?" Wednesday morning, Naomi stood outside a gleaming office building in Lower Manhattan, dressed in the only business outfit she owned, a black pencil skirt and white blouse bought secondhand 3 years ago for a job interview that hadn't panned out. The building's glass facade reflected the morning sun, and uniformed doormen stood at attention near the entrance. This was the legitimate face of Vincent Marcello's operations. Marcello Holdings, a property management and investment firm occupying the building's top 3 floors. She'd spent Tuesday in a whirlwind of transitions. Quitting her jobs had been surreal. Marco hugged her tightly and made her promise to call if she ever needed anything. The coffee shop manager barely acknowledged her departure. The data entry company accepted her resignation by email. Vincent had sent over contracts via courier, thick legal documents that Naomi spent hours reading carefully. Everything he'd promised was there in black and white. Salary, benefits, terms of employment. There was also an extensive non-disclosure agreement that made crystal clear the consequences of sharing information about Vincent's business or personal affairs. She'd signed everything, feeling like she was signing away more than just employment terms. Now, standing before this building, Naomi felt the full weight of her choice. This was real. This was happening. She entered the lobby, all marble and modern art, and approached the security desk. "Naomi Carter, I'm expected by Mr. Marcello." The guard checked his computer, nodded, and handed her a security badge. 28th floor. The elevator on the right. "Mrs. Rivera will meet you when you arrive." The elevator was mirror-polished, playing soft classical music. Naomi watched her reflection rise through the floors, trying to see herself the way Vincent apparently did. Capable, intelligent, worthy of this opportunity. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, the view spectacular. The furnishings were modern and expensive, the art on the walls genuine pieces she recognized from her art history classes years ago. And there, waiting near the elevator, was Maria, Vincent's housekeeper, though clearly her role extended far beyond that title. Naomi. Maria's smile was warm, genuine. Welcome. How are you feeling? Nervous. Terrified, Naomi admitted. Good. That means you're taking this seriously. Maria gestured for her to follow. Let me show you around. Then we'll get you settled into your office before Mr. Marcello arrives. He had an early meeting downtown, but will be here by 10. The tour was overwhelming. The 28th floor housed administrative offices, accounting, legal, human resources. The 29th held conference rooms and executive offices. The 30th was Vincent's private floor, his office suite, a full apartment for late nights, and now, Naomi learned, her office adjacent to his. You'll be his first point of contact for everything, Maria explained as they entered Naomi's new workspace. It was larger than her entire apartment, with its own impressive view, a desk that looked like it cost more than a car, and computer equipment that was clearly top of the line. All calls come through you unless he specifies otherwise. You'll manage his calendar, prepare briefing documents for meetings, accompany him to important appointments. Essentially, you'll know every detail of his schedule and operations. That's a lot of trust to place in someone he barely knows, Naomi observed. Maria's expression was knowing. Mr. Marcello doesn't make mistakes about people. If he chose you, it's because he's certain you'll excel. Don't prove him wrong. The morning passed in a blur of orientation. It set up her computer access. She had logins to systems she didn't understand yet, databases with cryptic names. HR processed her paperwork. The salary and benefits were even better than initially discussed, including a pension plan and stock options. Legal reviewed the confidentiality agreements again, emphasizing the seriousness of discretion. At precisely 10 o'clock, Naomi heard the elevator chime. Through her office's glass wall, she saw Vincent Marcello emerge, accompanied by two men she recognized from the restaurant, the security detail that always traveled with him. He moved through the space with practiced ease, the wheelchair an extension of himself rather than a limitation. Staff members greeted him with respect that bordered on deference, and he responded with polite acknowledgement that nevertheless maintained clear hierarchical distance. Then his gaze found her through the glass, and Naomi felt that now familiar sensation of being thoroughly seen. He approached her office, his security remaining outside. Miss Carter, welcome to your first day. He gestured to his own office. Shall we? His office was exactly what she'd expected. Massive, meticulously organized, with technology integrated seamlessly into the traditional furnishings. One wall was entirely glass overlooking the city. Another held monitors displaying what looked like security feeds from various locations. Sit, please. Vincent positioned himself behind his desk, and Naomi took one of the chairs opposite. Maria has oriented you to the physical space and basic procedures. Now let me explain what I actually need from you. He pulled up a calendar on his laptop, turning the screen so she could see. My schedule is complex because my interests are diverse. Legitimate business meetings, property inspections, charitable foundation events, and other appointments that require discretion. You'll manage all of it, which means you'll know things most people don't. You'll see things that might make you uncomfortable, and you'll need to maintain perfect separation between what you know and what you acknowledge knowing. Does that make sense? You're saying there will be aspects of your business I'll be aware of but shouldn't ask questions about. Exactly. Your intelligence is why I hired you, Miss Carter. I don't need you to pretend to be naive, but I do need you to understand boundaries. He closed the laptop. In return for your discretion and competence, you'll have my complete support. Need time off for your sister? Taken care of. Have a personal emergency? I'll handle it. Someone treats you disrespectfully? They'll answer to me. You're under my protection now, which is both a benefit and a responsibility. The possessiveness in that last statement wasn't lost on Naomi. And if I witness something illegal, something I can't morally ignore, Vincent's expression grew serious. Then you come to me first. You tell me your concerns, and we discuss them honestly. I won't always be able to change what troubles you, but I'll explain my reasoning and listen to your perspective. What I ask is that you don't make unilateral decisions to involve outside authorities without giving me that conversation first. Fair? It wasn't entirely fair. It still bound her to his judgment over her own. but it was more consideration than she'd expected. Fair enough. Good. He pulled out a file folder, slid it across the desk. Here's this week's schedule. Study it. Familiarize yourself with the people and places mentioned. Tomorrow, you'll accompany me to a property inspection in Brooklyn, then to a dinner meeting with potential investors. Friday, we have the Charitable Foundation Gala. I've already arranged for appropriate attire to be delivered to your apartment. Questions? Naomi opened the folder, scanning the dense schedule. Some entries were straightforward. 10 a.m., conference call with legal team regarding Fulton Street development. Others were more cryptic. 2 p.m., meeting with DS. RE, East River Matter. What does East River Matter mean? You'll learn when you attend the meeting. Part of your education will be contextual, seeing how I conduct different types of business. Vincent's slight smile suggested approval of her directness. Any other questions? Why aren't you concerned that I might be working with law enforcement? That this could be some elaborate setup? Because I had you investigated thoroughly before making the offer. I know you have no connections to any law enforcement agencies, no history of informant activity, no undisclosed debts or compromising situations that could be leveraged against you. I know every significant detail of your life, Miss Carter. If you were a threat, I'd have known before I ever spoke to you at the restaurant. The casual admission of such extensive surveillance should have angered her. Instead, Naomi felt an odd sense of relief. At least there were no illusions here. Vincent Marcello was exactly what he appeared to be. A man who controlled his environment completely, who left nothing to chance. Then I suppose we understand each other, she said. I believe we do. Vincent's dark eyes held hers. Welcome to your new life, Miss Carter. I think you'll find it far more interesting than serving pasta. As Naomi left his office to begin studying the week's schedule, she caught her reflection in the glass wall. She looked the same face, same body, same person. But she felt fundamentally changed, as if accepting this position had rewritten something essential about her identity. She was no longer just Naomi Carter, struggling waitress. She was Naomi Carter, personal assistant to Vincent Marcello, part of his world now, for better or worse. And despite her lingering doubts, despite the fear that still hummed beneath her surface calm, she felt something else too: anticipation. Whatever came next, at least it wouldn't be the slow death of exhaustion she'd been enduring. At least it would be something different. At least she could finally breathe. The afternoon was spent in intensive training. Maria walked her through the computer systems, the filing protocols, the complex web of Vincent's business interests. There were legitimate holdings: apartment buildings, commercial properties, a construction company, the charitable foundation, and there were the other things, mentioned only obliquely. Consulting services that seemed to involve no actual consulting, import-export operations with minimal documentation, security services that sounded more like organized protection. Naomi absorbed it all, her mind cataloging information, building mental maps of this new world. She'd always been good at pattern recognition, at seeing connections others missed. It was a skill that had helped her juggle multiple jobs and keep track of complicated schedules. Now she was applying it to understanding the architecture of Vincent's empire. You're picking this up quickly, Maria observed as they finished reviewing the filing system. Mr. Marcello will be pleased. What's your role here exactly? Naomi asked. You introduced yourself as his housekeeper, but clearly you're more than that. Maria smiled. I've been with the Marcello family for 32 years. Started as housekeeper for Vincent's father, stayed after he passed, transitioned to working for Vincent. Now I'm many things. Housekeeper, office manager, trusted advisor, sometimes surrogate mother when he needs someone to speak truth to him. He trusts very few people completely. I'm one of them. And the others? His attorney, his head of security, his younger brother who runs operations in Brooklyn, and now, potentially, you. Maria's gaze was assessing. He's giving you access very few people get, Naomi. That means he sees something special in you. Don't waste it, and don't betray it. The warning was clear, delivered with motherly gentleness but unmistakable in its seriousness. I won't, Naomi promised, hoping she could keep that promise even when things got difficult. At 6 o'clock, Maria indicated it was time to leave. Your official hours are 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, though there will be evenings and occasional weekends. Mr. Marcello is in meetings for the rest of the night, so you're free to go home. Oh, before I forget. She handed Naomi an envelope. Inside was a credit card with Naomi's name on it. Company card, Maria explained, for any business expenses, but also for professional attire. Mr. Marcello's assistant needs to look the part. Consider it a signing bonus. Get yourself a proper wardrobe. He's particular about presentation. The credit card felt dangerous in Naomi's hand, another tie binding her to this new life. As she rode the elevator down, Naomi checked her phone. A text from Jasmine. First day. How did it go? Naomi typed back. Overwhelming, but good. This is going to take some getting used to. You've got this. Love you. Love you too, Naomi thought, pocketing her phone. She emerged onto the Manhattan street, the evening rush hour in full swing around her. People hurried past, caught up in their own lives, their own struggles. None of them knew that Naomi Carter's life had just fundamentally changed. She'd crossed the threshold. Whatever came next, there was no going back to who she'd been before. Vincent Marcello had said, "Now you're all mine." And today, in signing those contracts, in accepting this position, Naomi had begun to make that statement true. The question was whether she was being saved or claimed. Time would tell. 3 weeks into her new position, Naomi had developed a rhythm that felt almost natural. She arrived at the office at 7:30 each morning, 30 minutes before her official start time, to review Vincent's schedule and prepare briefing materials for the day ahead. She'd learned his preferences. Coffee black, no sugar, briefings concise with bullet points rather than lengthy paragraphs, meetings scheduled with 15-minute buffers to account for his precise nature. The work itself was demanding but manageable. What surprised Naomi was how quickly she'd adapted to the dual nature of Vincent's business. Morning meetings with architects and city planning officials discussing legitimate real estate developments. Afternoon appointments with men who never gave their full names, discussing matters in careful euphemisms that Naomi had learned not to question directly. She'd accompanied Vincent to property inspections in Brooklyn and Queens, to charity galas where he donated generously while networking with politicians and business leaders, and to late-night meetings in private rooms where security swept for recording devices before anyone spoke. The money had transformed her life exactly as promised. Jasmine's tuition and housing were paid through graduation. Naomi had moved from her studio in Washington Heights to a one-bedroom apartment in a secure building near the office, arranged and subsidized by Vincent's company. Her bank account, once a source of constant anxiety, now showed a balance that seemed almost fictional, but the cost was becoming clearer. She'd witnessed things that troubled her conscience. A restaurant owner who'd fallen behind on protection payments, being told his establishment might experience unfortunate accidents if arrangements weren't honored. A construction contractor who'd tried to undercut Vincent's company on a bid receiving a visit from Vincent's security team, emerging pale and cooperative. Business conducted through intimidation rather than fair competition. Each time, Naomi reminded herself of Vincent's instruction. Come to him with concerns first. But she hadn't yet found the courage to have that conversation. It was a Thursday afternoon, unseasonably cool for September, when things shifted. Naomi was reviewing documents in her office when Vincent's intercom buzzed. "Miss Carter, could you come in, please?" She grabbed her tablet and entered his office. Vincent sat behind his desk, but his usual composed expression showed something unusual. Frustration. "Close the door," he said quietly. Naomi did, her stomach tightening. In 3 weeks, she'd never seen him genuinely upset. "We have a problem," Vincent began, gesturing to his computer screen. "The East River development, the one we've been planning for 8 months, just hit a significant obstacle. The city council member who'd been supporting our permits has suddenly changed his position. Someone got to him, made him a better offer, or applied the right pressure." "Can we address his concerns?" Naomi asked, moving into problem-solving mode. "If there are legitimate issues with the project?" "There aren't. This is strategy, not substance." Vincent's jaw tightened. "This is Marcus Delgado making a move. He wants that waterfront property, and he's using his political connections to block our permits while positioning his own bid." Naomi had heard the name before. Marcus Delgado ran a rival organization, controlling interests in the Bronx and parts of Upper Manhattan. Vincent had mentioned him occasionally, always with barely concealed contempt. "What do we do?" she asked. Vincent looked at her directly, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not anger, but calculation. Cold, precise strategy formulating in real time. "We remind certain people that Vincent Marcello doesn't lose territory to opportunistic rivals." He reached for his phone. "Cancel my afternoon appointments. We're taking a drive." "Where?" "To have a conversation. You're coming with me. You need to understand how this aspect of business works." Naomi's mouth went dry. This was it. The moment she'd known would come eventually. Whatever she was about to witness would cross lines she'd been carefully avoiding thinking about. "Mr. Marcello." "Vincent," he interrupted. "When we're alone, call me Vincent. And I know what you're thinking. You're wondering if you want to see this, if you can handle this. The answer is, you need to see it. Because if you're going to work for me, truly work for me, you need to understand all aspects of what that means." He was right, and they both knew it. Naomi had been operating in a careful middle ground. managing his legitimate business while pretending the other elements didn't exist. That couldn't continue indefinitely. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll get my jacket." 20 minutes later, Naomi sat in the back of Vincent's customized SUV, modified for wheelchair access with a hydraulic lift. As they drove through Manhattan toward the Bronx, Vincent's head of security, a man named Dominic, drove while another security team member, Santos, sat in the passenger seat. Both men were armed. Naomi had noticed the shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Vincent sat beside her in his wheelchair, secured safely, his expression unreadable as he gazed out the tinted windows. "The council member's name is Richard Morrison," Vincent said suddenly, his voice conversational despite the tension in the vehicle. "He's been in office for 12 years, has political ambitions beyond city council. 6 months ago, his daughter needed an emergency surgery that his insurance wouldn't fully cover. I arranged for the remaining costs to be handled anonymously. 2 months ago, his campaign for state senate needed funding. I facilitated donations through legitimate channels. These weren't transactions, Miss Carter. They were investments in relationships. And now he's breaking that relationship." Naomi understood. Not by choice. Marcus Delgado found leverage, probably something compromising, possibly fabricated. Morrison received a visit, was shown evidence or threats, and made the practical decision to shift his support. Vincent's tone held no judgment, only analysis. "In his position, I might have done the same. But consequences must follow, or everyone will think they can betray me without cost." The SUV entered a neighborhood Naomi didn't recognize. Industrial buildings interspersed with older residential blocks. They pulled into a warehouse district, stopping before a nondescript building with no signage. Dominic and Santos exited first, scanning the area before opening the vehicle's rear. The hydraulic lift lowered Vincent smoothly to ground level, and he gestured for Naomi to follow. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into what looked like a legitimate storage facility, rows of shelving holding inventory for what appeared to be restaurant supplies. But they moved past the main floor to a back office where 2 men waited. One was older, perhaps 60, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide his powerful build. The other was younger, 30s, with calculating eyes that assessed Naomi immediately. "Vincent." The older man nodded respectfully. "We weren't expecting company. Miss Carter is my assistant. She's learning the business." Vincent's tone made clear this wasn't up for discussion. "Sal, this is Naomi Carter. Miss Carter, Salvatore Russo. He manages several of our mutual interests in this area." Mutual interests. The phrasing was careful, revealing nothing directly. "The Delgado situation," Vincent continued, getting straight to business. "Where do we stand?" Salvatore gestured to a folder on the desk. "Morrison was approached 3 days ago. They showed him photographs. Him with a woman who isn't his wife. Apparently, Delgado's people have been watching him for weeks, waiting for an opportunity. Morrison has a clean public image. This would destroy his political career. So he's cooperating under duress," Vincent concluded. "That's different from genuine betrayal, which means we need to remove the leverage, not punish Morrison." Naomi watched the exchange, fascinated despite her discomfort. Vincent wasn't reacting with violence or threats. He was analyzing, strategizing, finding the pressure point that would resolve the situation. "The photographs are digital," the younger man spoke up, "stored on Delgado's personal servers. We'd need to access them directly or convince whoever has them to delete them. Or," Vincent said slowly, "we need leverage of our own. Something that makes Morrison more afraid of Delgado than of his affair being exposed. Something that turns him back to our side voluntarily." Salvatore's expression showed understanding. "Delgado's been trying to expand into waste management contracts with the city. If those contracts suddenly became complicated, if inspections revealed violations, if unions decided to protest working conditions, his political allies would become liabilities rather than assets." "Exactly." Vincent's slight smile held no warmth. "Make it happen, and make sure Morrison understands that continuing to work with us provides protection from whatever manufactured crisis Delgado's operation experienced. We don't need to threaten him. We need to remind him that we're more useful as allies than enemies." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, discussing logistics that Naomi only partially understood. References to union representatives, city inspectors, business licenses. Everything carefully phrased, nothing explicitly illegal, but the implications clear. When they returned to the SUV, Naomi's mind was churning. Vincent had resolved a significant problem without violence, without direct threats, using influence and leverage instead. But it was still manipulation, still operating outside normal legal and ethical boundaries. "You're quiet," Vincent observed as they drove back toward Manhattan. "Processing," Naomi admitted. "That wasn't what I expected." "What did you expect? Broken kneecaps and dramatic confrontations?" His tone held dry amusement. That's for movies, Miss Carter. Real power is quieter. It's understanding systems, knowing pressure points, having enough resources and relationships to shift outcomes without obvious force. But you're still destroying Delgado's business. That waste management crisis you're engineering, it'll cost him money, possibly ruin contracts, maybe hurt workers who depend on those jobs. Yes. Vincent didn't flinch from the observation. Welcome to the reality of competition at this level. Delgado tried to take what's mine. I'm responding proportionally. Those workers will find other jobs. I'll make sure of it, actually. Their unemployment will be brief and compensated. Collateral damage gets minimized when possible. But make no mistake, I protect what's mine, and I respond to threats decisively. Naomi stared out the window, watching the city pass by. How do you reconcile it? The charitable foundation, the legitimate businesses, being generous to people like Morrison, and then this? Because the world isn't binary, Miss Carter. Vincent's voice was quieter now, more reflective. I provide employment for thousands of people through legitimate companies. I've funded scholarships, medical treatments, community programs. I've helped families in crisis, protected neighborhoods from worse elements. And yes, I also operate in spaces where the law is more flexible, where power matters more than official rules. Both things are true simultaneously. That's convenient moral reasoning, perhaps. Or perhaps it's honest acknowledgement that morality is complicated when you're trying to build and maintain power in a world that doesn't reward pure ethics. He turned to look at her directly. You don't have to agree with my choices, Naomi, but you do need to understand them if you're going to continue working for me. The use of her first name caught her attention. He'd been consistent about Miss Carter in professional settings. This felt different, more personal. I'm trying to understand, she said honestly. It's just a lot to reconcile. I know. And I appreciate that you're trying rather than immediately judging. Vincent's expression softened slightly. You have a moral center that I respect. It's part of why I wanted you in this position. I don't need another person who thinks exactly like I do. I need someone who'll push back, who'll ask the uncomfortable questions, who'll keep me honest when possible. The rest of the drive passed in contemplative silence. When they returned to the office, it was nearly 6 o'clock. The administrative staff had mostly left for the day, leaving the 30th floor quiet. Come into my office for a moment, Vincent said as Naomi prepared to gather her things. She followed him in, confused when he didn't position himself behind his desk, but instead moved to the sitting area. A couch and chairs arranged near the floor-to-ceiling windows. He gestured for her to sit on the couch while he positioned his wheelchair facing her. This afternoon was intense, he began. I want to check in. Are you all right? Genuinely. The concern in his voice seemed authentic, catching Naomi off guard. I'm okay. Unsettled, but okay. Unsettled is appropriate. You should be unsettled by what you saw today. Vincent leaned forward slightly. The day you stop being unsettled by necessary cruelty is the day you lose something important. I learned that lesson years ago. From your father? Naomi asked, remembering Maria's mention of Vincent's family history. Partially. My father built this organization from nothing, came from poverty, fought his way to security and power. He taught me strategy, discipline, the importance of reputation. But he also taught me that ruthlessness without principles becomes monstrosity. Vincent's gaze drifted to the windows, to the city spread below them. 5 years ago, when someone tried to end me with that car bomb, my father's lessons were what got me through. Not just the physical recovery, but the psychological one. I was furious, wanted blood, wanted to destroy everyone even remotely connected to the attempt. But you didn't, Naomi said quietly. I did, but strategically. I eliminated the specific threats, sent clear messages about consequences, but I didn't let rage dictate my actions. My father's voice was in my head. Power isn't about violence, Vincent. It's about control. Control of yourself first, then your circumstances, then your environment. He looked back at her. That's what you saw today. Controlled response to a threat. Not rage, not excess, just precise application of influence. Naomi processed this, seeing Vincent Marcello in a new light. Not just the feared figure from Restaurant Whispers, but a complex man shaped by violence yet trying to operate with discipline and strategy. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you deserve to understand who you're working for. Not just what I do, but why. And because... He paused, seeming to choose words carefully. Because I find myself wanting you to see me clearly. Not the reputation, not the fear, but the actual person. The vulnerability in that admission was unexpected. For 3 weeks, Vincent had been professionally perfect, courteous, demanding but fair, maintaining clear boundaries. This felt different, more real. I'm starting to see you, Naomi said honestly. It's complicated. Most real things are. Vincent's slight smile returned. You handled today well, Miss Carter. Better than I expected for your first real exposure to the less pleasant aspects of this work. That strength of character I saw at the restaurant, it wasn't an act. You're genuinely as strong as I thought. The compliment settled warmly in her chest. Thank you. Though I'm not sure how I feel about being good at adapting to morally ambiguous situations. It means you're surviving in a complex world rather than retreating into comfortable simplicity. Vincent straightened in his wheelchair. Go home. Get rest. Tomorrow we have the Foundation Gala, which will be much more pleasant. Good food, minimal moral complications, just networking and appearances. Naomi stood to leave but paused at the door. Vincent? His eyebrows rose slightly at her use of his first name. Thank you for being honest with me today. About everything. It makes this easier. I'll always be honest with you, Naomi. That's a promise. The way he said her name, with careful attention to each syllable, sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. She left the office, her mind full of contradictions and complications. Friday evening, Naomi stood before her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing her own reflection. The dress Vincent had arranged for the charity gala was stunning. Deep emerald silk that complemented her skin tone perfectly, elegantly tailored, expensive in a way that showed in every seam and drape. Her natural hair had been professionally styled, makeup applied by someone who actually knew what they were doing. She looked like she belonged in Vincent Marcello's world. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The car service arrived precisely at 6:30. Naomi descended from her new apartment building to find not the usual SUV but an actual limousine. Dominic held the door open, his usually stern face showing the barest hint of approval at her appearance. Vincent was already inside, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. He wore a tuxedo that had clearly been custom-made to accommodate his seated position, perfectly fitted, making him look powerful despite his wheelchair. His dark eyes traveled over her appearance with clear appreciation. You look extraordinary, he said simply. You clean up pretty well yourself, Naomi replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the way her heart was racing. The gala was held at a prestigious Manhattan hotel, the ballroom filled with New York's elite, politicians, business leaders, socialites, and carefully selected representatives from organizations like Vincent's. Everyone who attended the Marcello Foundation's annual fundraiser understood its dual nature. Legitimate charitable work funded by money from less legitimate sources, creating a social space where multiple worlds could intersect. Naomi stayed close to Vincent as they navigated the crowd, learning quickly that her role tonight was partially professional, managing his schedule, facilitating introductions, but also personal. She was being presented as someone important to Vincent, someone under his protection and favor. The attention made her hyper-aware of every interaction. People assessed her carefully, trying to understand her significance. Was she just an employee? Something more? The ambiguity seemed intentional on Vincent's part. You're doing well, Vincent murmured during a brief moment alone. I know this is overwhelming. It's like being in a movie, Naomi admitted. Everyone's so carefully polished. Every conversation has multiple layers. Welcome to society at this level. Everyone wants something. Everyone's calculating advantages. His hand briefly touched her arm, the contact sending electricity through her. Stay close to me. I'll handle the politics. As the evening progressed, Naomi found herself genuinely enjoying aspects of it. The food was incredible, the music elegant, and watching Vincent work the room was educational. He was charming when needed, cool and distant when appropriate, and completely in control despite his physical limitations. Then Naomi noticed something that made her stomach tighten. A man was watching them from across the room, mid-40s, expensive suit, with an expression of barely concealed hostility. She leaned toward Vincent. The man by the bar. Gray suit, red tie. He's been staring at you for the past 10 minutes. Vincent didn't turn to look, which told Naomi he already knew. That's Marcus Delgado. His invitation was a courtesy I couldn't refuse without causing a scene. He's here to remind me he's not intimidated. Should I be worried? No. We're in a very public place with dozens of witnesses. Nothing will happen tonight except posturing. But Vincent's hand moved to his phone, sending a quick text. Within seconds, Naomi noticed Dominic and Santos positioning themselves more prominently nearby. The confrontation came during the silent auction. Naomi and Vincent were examining the items when Marcus Delgado approached, his smile entirely false. Vincent, what a lovely event. Your foundation does such important work. Marcus. Vincent's tone was coolly polite. I'm glad you could attend, though I was surprised to see your name on the guest list given recent developments. Recent developments? Delgado's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes were cold. I'm not sure what you mean. Business has been excellent. Expanding, even. New contracts, new opportunities. How fortunate. Vincent's smile matched Delgado's for artificial warmth. Though I've heard some of those contracts face unexpected complications. Regulatory issues can be so frustrating. The message was clear. Vincent was behind whatever problems Delgado was experiencing. Delgado's jaw tightened infinitesimally. Complications can be overcome with proper resources and determination. Delgado's gaze shifted to Naomi, assessment turning predatory. And who is this? I don't believe we've been introduced. Miss Naomi Carter, my personal assistant. Vincent's hand moved to rest on his wheelchair's arm, a seemingly casual gesture that nonetheless conveyed possession. Miss Carter, Marcus Delgado, who operates business interests in the Bronx. A pleasure, Naomi said neutrally, not extending her hand. Personal assistant? Delgado repeated thoughtfully. How interesting. You've certainly moved up in the world quickly, Miss Carter. Working for Vincent must be quite an education. The implication in his tone made Naomi's skin crawl. He was suggesting something inappropriate about her relationship with Vincent. Before she could respond, Vincent's voice cut through with Arctic precision. Miss Carter's professional competence and personal integrity are beyond question, Marcus, as is the nature of our relationship. I'd suggest being very careful about any implications to the contrary. The threat was unmistakable. Delgado's false smile faded into something more genuine, cold calculation. Of course, no implications intended. He stepped back. Enjoy the rest of your evening. As he walked away, Naomi released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was unpleasant. That was expected. He's testing boundaries, trying to understand what matters to me. Vincent looked at her directly. And now he knows. You matter to me, Naomi, which means he'll consider you a potential pressure point. The casual admission that she mattered to him sent Naomi's thoughts spinning. Is that why you've been introducing me to everyone tonight? To make me visible so attacking me would have consequences? Partially. Also because I enjoy your company and wanted you here. His expression held something she couldn't quite read. Is that acceptable? It was more than acceptable, and they both knew it. The professional boundaries that had been clearly maintained for 3 weeks were beginning to blur, and Naomi wasn't sure whether to be excited or terrified by that development. The rest of the evening passed in a heightened state of awareness. Every brush of Vincent's hand guiding her through the crowd, every quiet comment meant only for her ears, every moment of his focused attention, all of it accumulated into something that felt significant, intentional. By the time they returned to the limousine at midnight, Naomi felt emotionally exhausted and strangely exhilarated. Thank you for tonight, Vincent said as they drove through the quiet city streets. Your presence made it far more enjoyable than these events usually are, even with the confrontation. Especially with the confrontation. You handled Delgado perfectly. Didn't show fear, didn't escalate, just remained poised. He paused. You continue to exceed my expectations, Naomi. The car pulled up to her building. Dominic opened the door, but Vincent stopped her before she could exit. One more thing. His voice was quieter now, almost hesitant, an unusual tone for him. What happened tonight? Delgado's attention on you? It's a complication I need to address. I want to increase your security, a detail that stays with you outside work hours, monitoring your apartment building. Vincent, that's excessive. It's necessary. You've become visible as someone connected to me. That creates risk. Let me minimize it. His dark eyes held hers. Please. The vulnerability in that single word decided her. All right, if you think it's important. I do. Relief flickered across his features. Thank you. I'll have everything arranged by Monday. Naomi exited the limousine but paused before closing the door. Vincent, tonight was complicated, but good. Thank you for including me. His smile was genuine, transforming his usually severe features into something warmer. Sleep well, Naomi. I'll see you Monday. As the limousine pulled away and Naomi entered her building, she realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a job anymore. Whatever was developing between her and Vincent Marcello was crossing into territory neither of them had explicitly acknowledged yet. And despite every rational warning in her mind, despite the moral complications and obvious dangers, Naomi found herself hoping that crossing would continue. Behind the mask of professional propriety, something real was emerging, and it terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. Marcus Delgado launches coordinated attack on Vincent's operations. Naomi becomes primary target. Attempted kidnapping outside her apartment, thwarted by Vincent's security team. Vincent moves her to secure penthouse, ensures Jasmine's protection at Columbia. Refusing to be merely protected, Naomi reviews Vincent's business files, identifies patterns suggesting internal betrayal. Her insight reveals Vincent's trusted lieutenant has been feeding information to Delgado. Tense confrontation where Naomi's intelligence proves crucial, earning respect from Vincent's crew. With threat neutralized, Vincent offers Naomi complete freedom. Money, protection, fresh start anywhere, no obligations. Emotional climax, where Naomi realizes she's transformed, found strength and purpose. She chooses to stay, not from fear or debt, but genuine connection. Naomi as Vincent's true partner, both romantic and professional. Jasmine graduated, working legitimately. Final scene mirrors opening. Naomi at original restaurant, now training staff on fair treatment. Vincent watching with quiet pride. She approaches his table confidently. He takes her hand. Still mine? She smiles. Only because I choose to be. True power lies in choice, not control. Protection becomes partnership. Love requires freedom.